Hello friends, I'm Kayla and it's time for my final wrap up of 2024. Welcome to whatever day of Lalamas we're currently at. I'm going to tell you about all the books that I read in December. There was 26 of them. Most of them are here, but not all of them. And I have stats to show you. Check them out if you care about anything. But I will be talking through all of my end of year stats and like all of the little stat boards that I've shared every month in my end of year wrap up that's coming up in just a couple days. But first we have to get through the monthly wrap up, the quarterly wrap up, my worst books of the year. Maybe I'll do the bookish survey this year. I'm kind of feeling it. But anyway, I decided to organize it today by most to least festive for the holiday season. It started out that way and then I started to not be able to really distinguish what I even meant by festive. So the second half doesn't really make a lot of sense. We're gonna start with what I consider my most festive read of my month, and that is I'll Be Gone for Christmas by Georgia K. Boone. I don't think this is by any means the most festive read you could get your hands on, but it was the most of what I picked up. In here, it is a very Hallmark movie vibe, which I enjoyed. I gave it 4 stars. We have these 2 women and they're living very different lives. They're strangers and they end up exchanging houses on this house exchange website, as you do. And they explore, you know, what they want out of life, and they both gain a romantic relationship by the end and a better sense of self. So one of them is living in this small town and she's got out of a relationship and she is trying to understand her queer identity better, and she ends up in San Francisco and makes all of these friends and ends up falling for her sister. And then the other woman, she is going to like live some small town lifestyle stuff, like go to the Christmas market and go ice skating and just have a little cozier of a lifestyle. And she ends up falling for the other woman's ex-fiance. Sounds like it's gonna come along with drama. It doesn't really. It's pretty low stakes, it's fun, it's lighthearted, and it was a really good festive read. So that's my number 1 spot. Next up, I would say Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. This is set in Ireland in 1985, I want to say, where we have this man and he lives this humble life with his wife and his daughters, and they're approaching Christmas time, and there is some very Christmassy winter scenes in a soft, inviting way, but also it is about the bitter cold and the ways people are really struggling, so it feels like perfectly seasonal to me. And it's highlighting you know, women, young girls who are taken advantage of in vulnerable positions by organizations that are to the public seeming like they're helping them under you know, the guise of religion and government support. And he witnesses something at this local convent and he has to make this decision at Christmas time of like helping out somebody who needs help. And that's what the story is. I gave this a 4 star as well. I definitely understand the amount of people who enjoy that and kind of reread it this time of year. Next in line, I put The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year by Ali Carter. This was festive enough. Like, it's set during Christmas. They're going to these 2 authors who we're following manor in the English countryside. It's very sprawling, incredibly decorated, and Christmas parties leading up to Christmas Eve, where they're invited because this really well-known author, essentially like Agatha Christie within this fictional story, has invited these 2 authors who don't like each other to her home for the holidays for reasons. And it's just a really fun writing style. I loved that about it. It's kind of direct to reader, but it's very self-aware and talks about tropes within the mystery genre and how certain scenes are being set up. And I really loved that writing style. And you're following them solving a mystery because something happens at the manor and they have to figure it out. And since they are novelists, they think that they can put their brains together and solve it, but they're also falling for each other. They have a sordid past and it's a kind of enemies to lovers vibe. The first half of this I loved. I ate it up. I thought it was so fun. I was having a great time. And the second half was dull. It was really dull and it let me down and I got so bored. I got bored by the mystery. I got bored by the romance. I think independently, these characters are charming and interesting and they have fun banter, but like when they actually are communicating, I didn't really see the chemistry. I didn't actually end up loving them together by the end. And by the end, it just started to feel really rushed and like there wasn't a lot of thought behind what was happening. And maybe the author didn't want to insert too many high stakes, but therefore the scenes and the conversations and the reveals that were happening, the reactions from the characters were extremely dramatic, and it just didn't really fit with what I was liking about it before. I ended up giving it like a 3.5 because I enjoyed so much about this, but I don't think it knew what it wanted to be by the end. And it's one of those stories that in a couple months I'm gonna forget everything about it. Maybe it's more like a 3. In the moment, I wanted to give it a 3.5, but the more I sit on it, it does feel like a 3. Oh, another thing that I gave a 3 is Everyone This Christmas Has a Secret by Benjamin Stevenson. This doesn't feel plot-wise very Christmassy, but the book feels Christmassy because there are these Christmas tags and there's an advent calendar, there's like a secret Santa, and that's how clues are being explored. And it's fun to read physically and flip through. The actual story, like because it's set in Christmas, this is where it's at in my rankings. You're following Ernest Cunningham, who this is the 3rd book. Well, it's like just a little extra holiday novella in the middle of a series where he is just a normal guy, but he's surrounded by people who are committing crimes and he has decided to solve them. In this one, he has to protect or figure out if someone close to him is responsible for a crime. So it's that really typical cozy mystery. Someone is implicated who you know, you believe they didn't do it, and so you have to prove who did do it. There is a magic show that he goes to. It's leading up to an event. I don't want to give too much away because it is pretty short, but yeah, he solves the mystery and it's cozy enough. I just love the writing style of the books in general. So that's where my rating came from, even though I didn't find the mystery particularly compelling. I'm putting Cold Snap next in line, and it's coming right before an actual holiday romance. And that tells you how little holiday stuff is actually in the next one, because this is a horror novel. And it's set during Christmas, but it's definitely not warm, festive, inviting vibes. It is, okay, well first I think I need to say I hated it. I gave it a 1 star. This woman lost her husband and she is grieving him, also dealing with a lot of guilt, and she decides to take her son and cat, yep, to a cabin in the woods, and they encounter a killer moose. And where this could have been clever and interesting and twisty, it was not. It was confusing, it was strange, it was pointless, it was repetitive, and you don't have that many pages. This is a main character I hated more than anybody else this entire year, which is so unfair because she is a grieving human being and I wanted to feel for her, but I could not. Her decision making, I want to understand, but also, is any of this real? Like, we have My December Darling next by Lauren Asher. This is a holiday story. I can't get over the cover because it looks so Christmassy. And they do have a gingerbread building competition that lasts, I don't know, half a page. And that's basically the only Christmas vibes that I felt. This woman is back in her small town for her sister's wedding. There is a little bit of what could have been tension between everybody because her sister is marrying somebody she used to casually date. And now in this story, she is interested in that guy's best friend. So there's a love square going on, but it is all very lighthearted and low stakes and just chill. So there's not anything extremely stressful, which might be the exact vibe you're looking for. I gave this a 3 in the moment, and now compared it to the other things that I'm telling you I gave a 3, it feels more like a 2.75 because I know that I really didn't care about anything that was happening. The book itself physically is very cute. The story of this woman, just again, very Hallmarky, trying to figure out what she wants out of life and coming back to the small town. She's a traveling nurse and she is working at this hospital and she's like, I don't want to stay. I don't want to be stuck in this small town. But then makes the decision by the end, like where she belongs. And a lot of it is to do with Dr. Darling, the love interest who works at the hospital, and he just loves her and supports her, and she is There's a shell she has to get through. She's very self-aware of that, and we're constantly reading about her self-reflection of her own personality, which I mean is good, but it was also kind of exhausting for such a short book. Again, like, you guys gotta stop wasting my time here. That's all for that one. Next, I had to put this one next because there is one Christmas story in amongst the 4. This is Only One Cozy Bed by Elise Kennedy, and they're 4 cozy and spicy novellas. So each one follows a different couple in like this random wild scenario, and there's only one bed by the end. So in the first one, it's 2 characters traveling to the same small town who want to buy this bookstore, and they kind of have to fight over it. And it was really fun because they had to actually complete tasks by the bookstore, set up by the bookstore owner to decide who he wanted to be in charge. And then they had to stay at the same place, and there was only one bed. So it was cute and cozy, and then it was steamy. The next one, I think, was the one about FBI agents. That one did not work for me at all. There was a little fake dating in it. Then there was one about 2 best friends who realized they had feelings for each other. That one had so much potential, but before they even went on the, I can't remember how many, but they were like, let's go on 7 dates before New Year's or something. Before they even did that, they slept together. And it ruined all of the tension that could have been there. And then my favorite was one where this woman, was it Snowed In and Snuggle Weather? No, it was Hot Cocoa and Mistletoe. This is the one where there's 2 different characters who share ownership over this cabin, but they've never met. And then one year they both go for Christmas and do not realizing the other's gonna be there, and then they get snowed in and they sleep together. But first they have to get over their dislike of each other, and I just thought that one was fun and festive. Overall, I think that collection has to get a 3.5. My issue with it is more the collection overall. There are 2 stories I liked, 2 I didn't, but overall, like reading them back to back, all of the sex scenes were like copy paste from the other ones. Every single male love interest behaved the exact same way, used the exact same language, said the exact same things, did the exact same things once they got into bed. I wouldn't recommend reading all of them back to back like I did in 2 days. This one naturally just makes sense here. It's not festive and cute and warm, but it's set on an ice planet, so it's festive for me and the season that I'm in. This is Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. I gave this a 2 because obviously this is not something that I typically read anyway, so it's not fair of me to read and review. But even for what it is and trying to enjoy it for what it is, I didn't love the writing, but mostly I think that it should have leaned more into like the fun of it and the ridiculousness of it, rather than trying to have some really like romantic lessons or having some really horrific stuff happening within it. Like, and I think people have said later in the series she does go in that direction, but because we open with all of these women who have been held captive by these aliens, and it's talking about them like vomiting and their feces and they're struggling and they're being sexually assaulted, before we get into the romantic stuff of one of them escapes the little pod that they landed in before the aliens come back to get them. She goes and she wants to explore this planet and try to find a way out. She comes across this giant blue alien, a different race of alien, and they just have sex, and then a lot. And she has to convince him, they don't speak the same language, obviously, to come back to the pod and save the girls. And she's like convincing other girls, the aliens want to be with them too. And there's just a little too much like coercion and consent stuff that I had an issue with, breeding stuff I didn't love. And because there were so many scenes that were fun and stupid, I think it should have just been fun and stupid rather than like dark at some moments and questionable in others. So I had a mixed reading time with that one. And then here is where things don't make any sense. Like, I don't know what order to put these in. I don't know how to tell you that this is like festive in any way. It's not. But what I was thinking is sometimes fantasy, like as far as a book or a genre goes, I feel like fantasy is a more winter season thing to me than like nonfiction or thrillers, which are more summer vibes to me. So anyway, also because maybe some of them have to do with like family or romance, they feel more of something you would want to read in the winter or the holiday season. I don't know. This is Moon of the Turning Leaves by Webgisha Grice. It's a sequel of one of my favorite books, And I just didn't need the sequel to exist, but I loved the writing and I respected existing, and I gave it a 3. For the people who are wondering what happened to all the characters in the first book, Moon of the Crusted Snow, it gives you those answers. We reflect on them a decade later, and it's them at a point where, once again, something has happened and they need to shift with what they're doing. They need to move somewhere else. They need to change where they're living, because this is a futuristic climate in collapse kind of story. There are a lot of characters and they're trying to find out where some of their old friends and family have gone. They're connecting with a new community. They're being like welcomed in, and it has warm vibes and the writing is beautiful, but there's still a lot of bleakness in it. So I don't know. Next, I put Jade City by Fonda Lee. This I didn't end up loving, and I wanted to so badly, and I'm just gonna chalk it up to like the time that I read it, because I don't know how to express that it was just a 3 and why. So maybe just this detailed of a fantasy isn't something that I should be reading in this season. That's all I can think of. It is about this really interesting magic system. Jade, the control it has, it's kind of like a drug. Things can enhance it. It can enhance things. Some people control it. Some people want control over it, etc. And we're basically following this one family, and it's a lot of family drama of who's doing what, and it's like criminal activity. And all I know is it felt very thoughtful and intentional by Fonda Lee. There's a lot of metaphor and meaning that I can glean from so many things. The magic system was super interesting to learn. I think it was a lot less. I'm just going to repeat everything I said in my vlog. It was a lot less than I thought it would be, and I'm not usually one for a family drama. So I unfortunately got into this like family saga and didn't quite realize what I was in for. This wasn't my decision. It was chosen by a member, and I totally understand that, respect the recommendation. I hopefully would have read this on my own someday anyway, because it's so many people's favorite and I can see why. And because of that, I think it just has to be me and my taste. But I don't know how to fully express what it is about my taste that made it not work. Next, oh, I have like a bunch of books I'm missing actually. So maybe I would actually put Book of Doors before the next one I'm going to talk about, because again, that's fantasy and there's a lot of warmth to it. And so it feels like something you might want to read in December. Book of Doors started out so intriguing to me, and I was convinced in the first third that it was going to be a 5-star read. Like I loved it. I loved the concept. It kicks off with this woman working, she's selling books to this guy. She's always talking about books with this customer, and she's gotten really close to this customer, and he dies in front of her and he leaves behind this book, and she discovers that the book can open doors to other places. So when she opens the door to her apartment, she is holding the book and thinking about a different place. She opens the door and she is in that place. And the discovery of that and introducing a friend of hers to it, and them figuring it out, and her dealing with like the power of it and trying to figure out how far it can take her, if it could ruin things, like what good she could do with it. There was this whole exploration. And then we got into some other perspectives of people who have other books. So there's the Book of Doors, but there's also the Book of Memory. There's the Book of Pain. There's a lot of other ones you uncover. And there's this whole like world that she doesn't know about. And it becomes less of her story and more just like this epic about all of the different people who want control over these books, and the people who've had multiple books, and the people who have been fighting for centuries over the books and understanding where the books came from. And we do get all of that information. And I think the concept is so good and the reveals are so strong that the actual story, I don't know what I ended up giving it a 3.5, because I guess you'd say it was the pace. There were so many moments where the book felt like, and I was listening exclusively to the audiobook, so I didn't know. And like, I'm not looking at my phone often to see how far into it I am. I'm not really paying attention. I'm doing whatever else. I kept thinking the book was about to end. Like I kept thinking we were about to get like the final reveal and the explanation of everything, and then it was going to wrap up. That happened like 2 or 3 times while I was reading it, and I was only 30% of the way through, and then 60% of the way through, and then 70% of the way through. And it just felt so drawn out when everything was important to the story, but there was just something wrong with the structure of it. It was like we would get a full circle moment with a certain character and we would come to understand something, and there would be a storyline that was wrapping up, and then it would take like 50 pages to introduce the next idea, the next concern, the next issue that was going to arise that people would have to solve, and then that would end. And then I'd just be waiting like, what's next? It felt like a series of stories rather than one full novel. It sucks because I like how it all connected. I liked learning about all of the characters, but there was something wrong with it. I wanted to love it so bad, and I'm really jealous of everyone that I've seen who's been giving it a 5. Then we have Quicksilver. And this just feels crazy putting this right after, because I'm gonna tell you this is a 4, yet it is not as well written, but I was full, and it's longer, it's quite long, but I was never bored. I was never uninterested. I was hooked the entire time and I couldn't stop reading. Like I really had a good time with this. It's by Callie Hart, and it's about this girl who lives in like the lower portion of society. She's been training and working hard for a really long time. She's struggled. She has to steal and barter to survive. And one day she steals something and she gets in trouble, and she goes before like the royal people, and then a door opens and she gets whisked off into this dark fairy realm. And we have the dark fairy man there, and he uses her and her abilities, because she's an alchemist, to complete something for him. He puts her to work basically, and tricks her into something, and she is also bound to him in a certain way. It's not one of those stories where she's essentially enslaved and then falls in love with like the guy who did it. They have like common goals basically, and she also has really strong convictions and is really capable and has this ability, and they realize they can work together to accomplish something. And it's like the typical, she breaks down his walls throughout the story and figures out who the real him is. It all sounds so cheesy. I promise this one's good. He is like constantly pushing her away and creating barriers, but also is just like obsessed with her, enamored with her, is constantly flirting with her. They have this fantastic banter. The writing leaves something to be desired, for sure, but there was something about their dynamic and the storytelling, the magic, that I loved. I loved a lot about it. I put A Love Song for Ricki Wilde next because it's romance. That fits for the season. It's a little speculative in nature, and I can't remember what time of the year this actually takes place. Perhaps, oh my god, is there a date? June. Yep, could not be. Oh, and then February. Okay, so not exactly what I was hoping for. We have Ricki Wilde, who comes from this family, this lineage. They do this work and she's not really interested in it, the family business, and she wants to open this flower shop. And then she does so, and we follow her on this journey. And then she falls for this guy who, there's something weird going on with their dynamic and where they come from, essentially. They fall in love. I didn't feel it. I didn't feel their chemistry. I gave it a 3. I think the writing is beautiful. I know these people deserve this story. Happy for them. I just think things happened way too quickly. I think the sex scenes were really abrupt. A lot of it was really cheesy, especially the ending. And they just come to understand life and death and curses. And it was an interesting story to follow, but I didn't really feel much towards it, which is not rare for me with romance in the past like 2 years. This is Dungeons and Drama by Christy Boyce. It's a YA romance. She has to work at her father's board game store for a certain period of time as like kind of a punishment. And she falls for one of the other employees and they play Dungeons and Dragons. She's trying to save her school musical, and it was cute and soft and light, and she comes to understand her parents better and herself better, and there's a little fake dating. And it was just fine. I gave it a 3.5. We have There's Always This Year on Basketball and Ascension by Hanif Abdurraqib. This is the third memoir / critical analysis of art and sports that I've read from this author. And this one obviously is very sports focused, so I feel like it's probably my least favorite, but it's still a 4. Like, he is a fantastic writer. It reads like poetry. He's always coming back to certain concepts, and there's just so much that I highlighted and enjoyed about this. And what I will say is it felt the least about individual essays as the larger overall concept. It flowed better than anything else that I've read from him. And maybe that's because this one, I might be wrong, but I think this one was written more with intention. The other ones were like combinations of things that he's written for other publications. I don't know if that's true or not, but I feel like that's true. I have Yours for the Taking next. This is by Gabrielle Korn. And this I read with my channel members. We had an hour-long live show discussion, and it was so interesting to talk through what everybody's thoughts were about this. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4. It's a dystopian science fiction story where if you're somebody who wants like explanations and to understand the technology and everything that's going on, it might not be for you. But if you are just along for this like character driven journey, and also commentary on like government control and billionaires and corporate feminism and all this stuff, I think you could really be into it. So in the future that this exists in, the world is crumbling, and they create these pods, like cities that are completely sealed and reliant. And everyone outside of it essentially is going to die in the near future. And so you want like a ticket to the inside. We're following characters at the beginning who, there's a couple and one of them gets a ticket inside, one of them doesn't. And they have to decide if one of them is still going to go inside. And then it quickly shifts into like so many other perspectives. We have the billionaire who's like controlling this one specific pod in New York. You're following a doctor that she brings on board to like help with the reproductive stuff within the pod. You're following an assistant of hers who is going up to space with her because all of the billionaires are going to live in space while the cities exist on their own and also help produce things for the people on the ships to survive. And there's just all of these really interesting dynamics between the characters. There are a lot of conversations about reproductive stuff. The people who decides who's gonna like end up in the place, who should be allowed to have children, who should be manipulated into having children. It's all so interesting, and it is not holiday cozy at all, but I thought it was a fascinating read. Next, I put Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. This is about a boy who is in his senior year of boarding school, and he is trying to decide who to spend his time with. He has a twin and he has a best friend, a love interest. He's trying to decide he's trying to figure out his sexual identity. He has a lot of grappling with like, am I gay enough? If I just like this one boy, does that make me gay? Does that make me bisexual? Like, who am I in that? While he's also dealing with monsters at the school, him and this best friend, love interest, create and have to kill these monsters to save themselves in the school. And I gave it a 4. The writing was beautiful. There's like some reveals that I really liked. And overall, I really liked it. Then we have The Bogwife by Kate Chronister. This is about a family who lives in West Virginia. It's folk horror. They're all of these siblings, and different generations like get involved with this bog wife. Like, you find your wife in the bog, and the character who's supposed to do that is struggling to find this bog wife. And so the rest of the siblings are talking about how to find her, how to find love, who's going to carry on the family name, if they should have children. And it's just them kind of exploring their own individual personalities and their place in society, like going into town, some of them meeting people for the first time, some of them staying at home trying to feel safe. And I gave it a 3 overall. I liked the vibes, but the plot wasn't the most interesting to me. I don't know if I liked following all of the characters independently. I don't know if I just would have wanted it written differently. I don't know what it was about it, but it wasn't my favorite. I could see how it would be for other people though. Sky Full of Elephants by Sibo Campbell is another dystopian kind of story. This one I gave a 5. It's so good. I've been rereading it because I didn't get fully on board until halfway through, and then I really got on board, and then I questioned, can it be a 5-star? And it is. Oh, it is. This one day, all of the white people on the planet walk into the sea. That's how it kicks off. And it's just the way that that impacts everybody else on the planet. We're essentially mainly just following this man who his life is immediately changed. He was previously imprisoned upon this moment happening, and the daughter that he's never met, and her and his relationship. They both exist in a world, in the world where the racist systems and the racist family members that they have, she is biracial. So she's grown up with a certain view of herself and the black side of her family that she doesn't know. They grew up with these influences, and it's about where they go from here, where they go when they have no other family, where they go when their life has completely changed direction, and what community they're going to find, and who they are as people when they're no longer being impacted the way that they used to be by white folks. And then there is this grander societal conversation, and they find different groups and pockets to exist in. And it's just, it starts out being this dystopian concept, and then it does get more into the science fiction, like technology stuff and his impact on that. And I loved the direction the story went in. I just loved everything about this. The writing, so good. The conversations around identity and society and safety and family, like it was all just so well done. So that is that. Then we have James by Percival Everett, which I gave a 4.5. This is a story inspired by The Adventures of the Huckleberry Finn, and we're following Jim. He is enslaved, and it's Percival Everett's take on what his life would look like, the kind of person that he would be, and what happens after, you know, the original story. The author has created this entire life for him outside of being a side character to someone else's story. He has a family, he has desires, he's thoughtful and he's fun, and there's just a lot going on in here. He decides one day when he overhears he's going to be sold, decides to take matters into his own hands and try to find freedom. And at the same time, a local boy is also escaping his own situation, and they come together on this raft down the river, and it's where the story goes from there. It takes on a total life of its own. I loved all of the concepts. I loved the writing. I love this author's writing, and I gave it a 4.5. Next, I have one that I don't physically, oh, that's another 5-star, The Lion Women of Tehran by Marhan Kamali. This was such a good story. We're following these two young girls in Iran, Ellie and Hama, and their journey from childhood to adulthood with each other. So they come into contact with each other when they're young children. They have very different upbringings, very different things that their parents are encouraging or discouraging in their lives. And Hama has a lot of ambition. She wants to be powerful. She wants to change laws. And Ellie is more influenced to marry rich and just find somebody so she doesn't have to work, and her mother just has a different idea of what her life should look like than Hama's parents. And they end up going to different schools, coming back together, being separated again because something horrific happened between their friendship and to one of them. And then the story opens up, the novel, with them like reflecting on, well, we haven't spoken in like 15 years and now we have to come back together for this reason. And you're waiting to see what that reason is, but you're also waiting to see what broke them up to begin with. The writing of this was incredible. It was so engaging the entire time. I couldn't wait to find out what these characters were going to go through. Some absolutely horrific things go down in this book. And then there's also this beautiful impact of the importance of support and friendship. It was just so special, and it's going to be one of my most recommended, I think, to people just like who, not for the people who take my like thriller and horror picks, but when I read the odd general fiction that gets 5 stars and I push it on everybody, this is the one. This one, it was so well crafted. It's not full of like thrills and intrigue, but you're just so invested in these characters, I think, from page 1. At least I was. Another one I don't have is The Wedding People by Alison Espach. This one I remain surprised that people are loving. Like when I read books like this, when the characters are kind of unlikable and it's not the typical story that you think it's going to be going in, I just find that people don't mesh with it. But I love that I loved this and that so many people love it. You're following this woman who she is struggling with what to do with her life. She's lost a relationship. She's missing out on a lot of things, and she books this vacation to a place she's always wanted to go to end her life. And she goes there, and it's kind of like a funny feeling story, because every time she goes to do something that is like her last moment, she's like, this is my last this is my last meal, things are, a wrench is thrown in her plans, basically. There's a wedding happening at this venue, and she wasn't supposed to be able to book a room at all, and she ended up there, and she can't order a room service. She can't go to like the restaurant. She can't, there's so many things she can't do because there's this wedding going on. And meanwhile, you have the bride, and everything that the character is doing feels like she's trying to ruin her wedding. And so there's also this like weird funny vibe with that, because she's like this self-absorbed, like whiny person who's just like, I can't believe you would do this, not at my wedding, this is so ridiculous. And you'd think we're on this way to a warm story where they become friends and they become so close, and the way they impact each other is so beautiful, and they learn to not be, or you know, the bride learns to not be self-obsessed, and the other woman learns that there is things to live for. That's just not what it is. There remains some messy personality dynamics, and I don't know, there was just something about it that was very readable, very engaging. I had such a good time with it, though the tone of it was just so mixed. I couldn't figure out how I was supposed to feel about certain moments. And there is definitely some character development. It's just not exactly the way that I thought it would go down. So that's that one. Then I have First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. This I gave, did I give it a 1 or a 2? I'm not totally sure. I just think this wasn't the thriller for me, and I've learned, I read it for the Goodreads video, so it wasn't completely in my control. I did have a little bit of control, but I just don't like a con woman story, a con man story. It's not for me. It's never gonna be for me. I don't know what I was thinking. So there's that, but also it was just really predictable, and it was really boring, and I don't think it was confusing, but I don't think that I appreciated or needed the 10 million different timelines and flashbacks to her life before and the different jobs that she did to understand the overall story. I really don't have anything to say about this one. You have to suspend your disbelief for so much of it, and a lot of times I love that. I love a ridiculous, over-the-top scenario, but it was just ridiculous in a way that I couldn't appreciate. I was like, you're setting this character up to be this thing and this other character to be this thing, and wouldn't they be able to see, like, how is this, you're supposed to make me believe that this is a realistic thing that would happen in this scenario? I don't know. I didn't like anything about this. I didn't like the writing or the plot or the characters or like any of the decisions in it. And I'm a little bit baffled by people's obsession with that one this year. Next up, okay, that's falling over. Like I said, nonfiction. Doesn't really feel very cozy and seasonal. This was fantastic. This is All in Her Head by Elizabeth Coleman, MD. I gave it a 4.5. It is all about medical misinformation and scientific research and things in history that have been mistold, misdiagnosed, wrongly diagnosed, specifically with women. Each section is about a different part of our bodies, like bones and muscles and breath and nerves, and it talks about so many different things. There are different studies and a different like person in history that's being highlighted, or a patient of this author's who deals with cancer and talks about how that impacts people, but also just like the history of something. So she's talking about like domestic violence within the breath section. She's talking about dissecting cadavers and corsets in the bones section and the respect for bodies, but also like societal beauty standards. And there's just so much good stuff in here, valuable to learn about if you don't already know. Really well organized, personal experiences. There's highlighting of specific people, like people who've been imprisoned, or people who have been medically experimented on. And I just think overall this was really valuable. And then the worst nonfiction that I read, The Small and the Mighty by Sharon McMahon. This is 12 unsung Americans who changed the course of history from the founding to the civil rights movement. The people in here absolutely need to be highlighted. I just don't think the book was written well. I gave it a 2. At the same time, I can recognize that there is a lack of like reading level with people who who might potentially read it, and so it may have to be written at a certain comprehension level. And to me, and especially the audiobook, really felt like I was being talked down to, and that I could have never come up with a single one of these issues, like with this person in history being treated the way that they did, and like the author was the first person to ever have these thoughts. But I do also want to recognize that it may just not be for me. Though I'm gonna keep my rating, because alongside that, I do also just think it was too messy. It was chaotic. She inserted like opinions where it wasn't necessary. She inserted like concepts about the entire society and different like times in history that weren't relevant, related to this one person. And it wasn't just about the 12 unsung people. Like there were groups of people. It was just not exactly the organization that needed to exist in this type of book. But I know that so many people liked it. It was in the Goodreads Choice Awards, and the audiobook was even highlighted in the Goodreads Choice Awards, so people liked the audiobook. I don't get it. I hated the cadence of her speech. I really could not stand listening to it. But that's the only way that I had my hands on it, and maybe it impacted my feelings, and it shouldn't be a 2, but I'm giving it a 2. The last thing that I have, I think, is Everything Feels Like the End of the World by Elsie Fitzgerald. This one just doesn't feel seasonal and warm and cozy at all, because it's like warm hot. It's like the world is burning, everything's on fire, and maybe that is relevant to the season in Australia, but it's not like nice and festive for sure. This is many speculative, it gets more speculative as you go, stories of the future of the world, and just like these small stories of somebody dealing with what's going on with climate change and how society's changing with the changes of the planet. Most of it, I feel like reflecting on it now, was about like reproductive stuff, fertility stuff. There were stories of people who couldn't have children because of the devastating way the climate was impacting their bodies. There was this dystopian future where you had to get like a license to have children, and who was allowed to have children. There was people who couldn't care for their families. There were people who were desperate for to have a family. And I gave it a 3 because there was very little actual impact. When you might expect in a story for it to have like a reveal, a twist, an impactful moment, like a quote that was really beautiful, not a single one did. They were just like these little glimpses into a concept. And I think it was probably really valuable for this author to have this creative writing experiment, because they were all very different as far as how they were written. We had first person perspective, second person, third person. Some was written as like journal entries, some was written as code. It was experimental, and I didn't love anything in it, but I didn't dislike anything in it. So I'm just leaving it at a 3. I do believe that's all 26 of the things that I read. I hope I didn't forget anything that I don't have here physically. Thank you so much for watching. I can't believe this is the final wrap up of the year. I'm gonna do my wrap-ups a little bit differently next year, and I think that'll be great for you and I both. I'm excited to wrap up this year because there were wins here, but there were not very many wins this entire year, and I'm gonna look back on 2024, unfortunately, with a little bit of a disappointing lens. So I'm excited to start fresh in 2025, and before that, I'll see you for a couple more wrap-ups of the year. We'll chat a little bit more, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!